Okay, thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Society of Antiquaries. Thank you so much for all coming along today. My role here today is to just give you a quick introduction about us and who we are, and then to introduce our speaker for this lunchtime lecture. So for those of you who don't know about the Society of Antiquaries, we were founded in the early 18th century in a pub, which is very appropriate. By the middle part of the 18th century, 1751, we had our royal charter from George III. And at the same time, we were originally given rooms in Somerset House. We moved here to Burlington House in 1874, and we focus on fellowship, conservation, research, and dissemination of our work. We remain focused on those objectives that were outlined in the 19th century, and we are a registered charity. So we're committed to sharing our collections and our work with the public, which we do through public lectures like this one today, through tours, exhibitions, research seminars, and a program of publications. So this year we had launched an affiliate membership scheme. So for those of you who are not fellows or who are not yet affiliates, I do encourage you to have a look at the affiliate scheme, which would give you access to our wonderful library, which is in the building. So a couple of quick housekeeping things. This is a hybrid event today, so we're welcoming not only in person here in the audience, but also online. There will be a question and answer session at the end of today's talk, and we'll be taking questions from the room and via the magic of the internet. If you would like to ask a question online, please type it into the chat function in the Zoom, and we'll ask as many as we can at the end of the lecture. For those of you who are here in the room, if you wave at us, then we will be bringing a microphone to you and be able to ask your question in person. So to turn to our talk today, today's lecture is from Tony Hack, fellow of our society, and is about Wiltshire's historic graffiti and protective marks. So a few words about our speaker. Tony has had a lifelong interest in history and archaeology, particularly with regard to prehistory. He's completed an BA archaeology degree at the University of Southampton during a midlife appraisal, which is an excellent way of putting it. I'm very, very delighted to learn something, a new way of describing a midlife crisis. And he wanted to expand on some of the photographic and computer processing techniques that he'd been introduced to at Southampton. Originally focusing on prehistoric rock art, including trips to the continent and to Scotland and to the west coast of Ireland. And that sort of sparked an interest into the medieval period, and recording rock art led to looking at how you could also record medieval inscriptions. And the Wiltshire Medieval Graffiti Survey was created in 2014, that's correct, to support and share information with other regional graffiti recording groups around the country. So during lockdown, Tony completed an MA in English Buildings History at the University of York, with his dissertation based around the barn at Bradford-on-Avon, which he was allowed access to during lockdown to complete the survey work that he was undertaking under license from English Heritage and the Bradford-on-Avon Preservation Trust. And part of that work will be included in his talk today. So it's with the greatest of pleasure that I hand over to Tony, and I'm really looking forward to hearing all about Wiltshire's medieval graffiti.
Thank you very much, Nat. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to come and speak. You know, it's a long old trek up here from Wiltshire, and it's been a bit fraught this morning. So country lad coming into the big city is a bit much, really, but it's great, it's grand, lovely welcome, lovely building. And yeah, this opening slide, really just cover slide. I wanted an angle on this. If I'm doing a talk in Wiltshire, I'll just go around and I'll bring in some local buildings or local graffiti or local history that's relevant to a speaking group. So when we came up to London, I thought, well, I need a different angle on this. And I'm very much into the study of the Neolithic and prehistory in general. And I like the movement of people. I like the movement of cultures, and I like the movement of artworks. And there's some of this within this. So why are we recording graffiti? And there's so much variety that I can't include it all. I can only include specific examples because it's a lunchtime lecture, and you'll get sick of hearing me after a couple of hours, I'm sure. but so we've kept it to the Wiltshire greatest hits really, but I've just come back from Ireland, so I put in a bit of rock art as well, just techniques that we're using. And I include this slide because this is Imber in the middle of Salisbury Plain. And it is a landscape that has prehistory, ably looked after by Richard Osgood, my fellow member, and it has a medieval buildings. This beautiful church, St. Giles, and it has some military activity. So when we're looking at movement of people, I've included in Wiltshire military, prehistory, and a lot of medieval as well. And hopefully there'll be little bits and pieces that they'll think, hang on, this is piquing my interest. Just see if we can work this out in our own areas, things like that. So we are doing a conference in York as part of the National Symposium for the Study of Historic Graffiti. Now, in terms of movement of people, in terms of geography, we have many speakers from around the world coming, particularly the European continent. So it shows how this it moves through time, and it moves through geography as well. So it'd be nice to see different aspects and different takes from different areas. So if you've got a date in your diary for the 19th of November, then please do so. We should be releasing some more information on that soon. Our current project is at Laycock, and if anybody's ever been to Laycock, it is a wonderful, wonderful building. It's got an abbey that was then on a dissolution, converted into a house, William Sharrington. It also brought in a lot of different buildings, some of which were made from stone from the preceding church to the abbey. So there's places that are locked off, places that are blocked off, places that we can see where they brought in technology, so bread making, there's brewing, and we can see the marks that go with that. So they'll be showing some of that. So there's a long list of very technical stuff here, and I don't want to make it intimidating, but it's just some of the things that we apply. Now, in terms of running a community-based group, we generally start with a basic raking light, which is an oblique light cast across the landscape. And while I mentioned raking light, Anthea's here at the moment. She and Linda run the Raking Light website. You're not, and so Anthea sat there, and they provide a nice wide variety of graffiti from around the continent, around the UK, which people contribute to. So it's a good, very good resource for learning and learning more about the subject. So go on with the Raking Light. We've got photography. Now, I'm not a photographer, okay? I have a camera and I have a light. I'm reasonably good at taking a photograph with a light. One of our members' fathers said, the best camera to have is the one you have with you. And that is so right in so many different scenarios. We use something called reflectance transformation imaging, which is this wonderful thing learned at university. And I got sent to the stores to actually go and get something. And I don't think I ever retrieved it because I found this wonderful dome in there, which was used for portable objects. And essentially, it's a single camera and lots of lights in a computer program. Wonderful device for revealing detail in historic objects. We use photogrammetry, show a little bit of that. We use laser scanning. I haven't got a very expensive car. I've got a very expensive laser scanner. We bought that to use for museum pieces, but we wanted to test its limitations and how we could cause some graffiti with it to see if it gave us any benefit. It wasn't to replace anything else at all. It was just to see, how good is this thing? Well, it's incredibly good. To its detriment, it actually shows up the working and cutting marks. It shows up absolutely everything. And it's a wonderful beast. But it is very expensive and very difficult to apply. However, I will start with that and I will say, I'll show you something. That's the laser scanner. That's John Samways. John Samways' name will come up. He's a member that's been with us since 2014. Now, he's known as Eagle Eye John. You know, he has an eyesight which is fantastic. he can see stuff that nobody else can see. And that's the thing. You're looking at a wall, you're looking at a building that's essentially a blank canvas until you stick a light on it, a bleak light, a raking light, which emphasizes detail. And this is probably one of the surfaces you don't want to be laser scanning. It's a bright marble. Sorry, yes. I don't very often get told to talk up. I get told to talk down, but there we go. So the marble is very reflective, and this is in the top of that tower I've just showed you at Laycock. And it's a medieval piece. I think the marble may be Italian. It was brought here, made into a table, and there's some great details on it. It's a very high status area of the building, so it's right at the top, and it contains this beautiful table, which contains its own set of inscriptions. So this is a laser scan of part of that table, and you can see that it's bringing out detail. Now, part of the thing with a laser scan, it gives so much information, you have to reduce it, reduce it, reduce it. And then you reduce it so much that you can't see the detail anymore. So you've got this Fibonacci spiral on the table. Now, a lot of this talk is of protective marks and protective elements of buildings. And there's a lot of geometry involved in that. I don't believe that this actually is an apopatreic mark. That'll be your word for the day. Apopatreic, from the Greek to avert, principally in this case, evil. However, on this table, you see the hexafoil. The hexafoil will be repeated throughout this as a symbol of protection. Also used in geometry for laying out of a building. However, the Fibonacci spiral is something different on this. You're using elements of geometry to create this spiral on the table. There are 3 others on this table, and they're not as good as this one. So whether it's an educational device, whether somebody's been actually saying, well, this is how you create this. This is what we're going to do. But the others are not up to this standard. Now, in terms of using equipment, this laser scan itself, we invited some of the staff from Laycock to come up and have a go. And this was done by Bethany. She had a wonderful steady hand. She listened to a little bit of instruction, which is probably a bit vague for myself. And then she produced this wonderful laser scan, which is just perfect. You know, it's about maintaining a regular height and a steady hand. And she was absolutely bang on with it. It was wonderful. I was very pleased with that. It shows that the technology is not beyond everybody. It's there. It can be used. It can be learned and applied quite very, very well. So why study graffiti at all? What's the attraction? It's a social thing. There's a lot of protection, symbolism going on. There's a lot of cleansing of buildings as you walk through a space. There's a lot of mystery, and there's a lot of things that we can get our head around because we may recognize certain traits within it in our normal working lives. We also may recognize, particularly we do some World War I graffiti, which we got into, and that's not that far away in terms of mindset and understanding why a mark can be left. When you get further back, it gets a little bit more esoteric, and you're trying to step into the medieval mind, and you're trying to understand why these things are placed where they are. So on the left is Steeple Ashton, beautiful, beautiful church. And Rosie has had she's one of the curators of the church, and she has this lifelong affinity with the building. And she said, "You want to see this on the top?" And it's just, it's this guy. It gives so much information. Claire's here, our genealogist. She doesn't have to work very hard with this kind of information. If you get a name and a date, it's a struggle to find a set of initials. You know, whether it's tourist graffiti, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to apply anything to anybody. But when you've got this kind of information, George Giddings, apprenticed to William Giddings in the year of our Lord, 1827. So you're in an age of reform. You're an age of education. This 14-year-old lad is writing this on a glass pane. And then you find that later, glaziers are coming in the following century and seeing this and then doing similar. So they're also adding information, which is fantastic. It's written well, and it gives a stack of information. And the young lad lives in the village as well, which is nice. So another name and date. So we're, I don't know how far away we are from Newgate, I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, it's Thomas Cobhead wrote this in Bath Abbey. We've tried tracking this guy. He was a clerk in church in Gloucestershire and Wiltshire. And this is important because it gives a lot of information. It's well incised. It's on the cusp of the change from Roman numerals to Arabic lettering and numbers. So he's using a combination of both. And then when we trace Thomas Cobhead, whether it's the same guy, I hope it is, in Newgate, and he's preaching from in the church when an earthquake happens in 1580. Now, this is essential to actually, you read something and then it sends you off in a different direction. And that's the beauty of it. It encompasses various different things that you never, ever expected. So I was unaware of an earthquake, and it happened in the English Channel. It affected buildings in Paris and buildings in London. Now, the power of religion at this time, imagine standing at a pulpit and preaching, and then the wrath of God, and you're bringing down parts of the building through this earthquake. It must have been quite a powerful statement, I must admit. So that's just two examples of just two names and dates. Often you'll find geometric marks, not necessarily as apotropaic marks, but also as architectural marks. And this causes some debate. And this is the important thing. I've met Natalie through sharing information, in essence, and then we did the first Making the Mark conference. But by sharing information, you build up a corpus of information that helps you understand, and you bring in people with different skills. So i.e. modern builders, carpenters, and everything else will recognize this kind of symbolism in order to calculate and lay out either a roof or a building or something like that. Well, the top left one is at Laycock, and it's in a secure, what I call a secure dating area. And this is a problem we have with graffiti, is secure dating. This is in the end of the cloisters. The cloisters are renowned, possibly due to their construction, but also recently, the Harry Potter trilogy, because they're used in that. But this is tucked away. This is what's known as the beer cellar, and it's a closed off piece of the cloisters. So originally it would have been open, and you would traverse through there and through the rest of the building via the cloisters. And this is sealed off. So this predates that sealing. So it predates the the dissolution. So there's a couple of crosses there. There's this beautiful hexafoil, this rosette. So you're using a rosette, a possible solar symbol, which has been used for thousands of years through different cultures. So again, it's this movement of people and movement of ideas and movement of and sharing of designs, just as one element. To the right is Eddington. And I found this one dark night, didn't I, Claire? No, I didn't. Claire found it. All right, she never let me forget it, because she teased this out of the. It's very, very finely etched into the stonework. It's practically invisible, and only by lighting it up at night could we actually get the detail out of it. The bottom piece is again very enigmatic. It's scrawled into the lime within the beer cellar, so it's in the same room as the top left apotropaic mark, but this has some sort of design element to it and may be used for calculating out perhaps some of the new buildings or something like that. Again, we're in the initial stages. We've only just recorded this. We're in the initial stages of working this out. So again, that's a laser scan. And again, I've just re-annotated it just to emphasize some detail. Now, in terms of the military aspect in Wiltshire, there is a lot of activity in terms of graffiti. So you're moving people in from foreign countries. This is from an airfield. It's on a private house, so and the buildings associated with it. But what I can say, it's an ex-NAFI. So what you've got is a military influx. In 1942, I think the Americans took over this airfield, and they come into the buildings, because it was ex-RAF buildings, and they bring their own decoration to make people feel at home. They're in a foreign land. They're going to war. It's not going to be a nice scenario. So there's this wonderful mural that covers the wall, which has deteriorated rapidly. In the foreground, there's a fighter pilot sat within a cockpit. But I was intrigued by, because they were understanding. They said, "Well, it's a de Havilland." I said, "No, it's not. It's not. The wings are too high." And so we used this D-Stretch software, which was created by John Harmon for American indigenous Indian rock art. So he's using filters and pigmentation software to isolate the different artworks there. So I wanted to use it on this. We also use it on 12th century paintings. It's excellent for that. It brings out a lot of detail. So we managed to isolate this, enhance a little bit, and just enough to recognize it as a Douglas A-20 Havoc. Not a rare aircraft, but one that was definitely in place on that airfield. This is very modern. You know, we don't go beyond World War II, to be honest. It gets a bit salacious, a little bit naughty, and a little bit, unbroadcastable. We were given these some years ago by Wiltshire Buildings Record, who we share a very close relationship with. Wiltshire Buildings Record, a registered charity, they will date your house quite nicely, and they give us a call whenever they find something nice. And the chap, S. Burns, who took these photographs, this is in the middle of Warminster. Okay, so we're back onto that Salisbury Plain training area, and it's the John Deere Regiment that brought into there. Now, we did get in touch with John Deere last year, because we've sat on these for a few years, and thankfully, Warminster Preservation Trust are on the case. So they've been liaising with John Deere, and Bob Wise worked for John Deere. So Bob Wise drew these, and he was in their art department for many years after the war. But it's the information it gives you. You know, I was just reading this yesterday, because I don't know much about horses, but if you Google Santa Anita, it's a racetrack. If you Google Seabiscuit, there's a YouTube video of the horse winning, right? In 1940, absolutely fantastic. You know, it's just wonderful. So it leads you into other places. Again, a little bit salaciousness, but not distasteful. The bottom left hand, and showing the difficulties of a John Deere regiment soldier going uphill, all the time. So, but it's the chef, right? Okay. I've heard stories of, I think it was the Who was the last one, the rock band The Who, saying when we first toured the States in the 60s, we came back with steaks the size of our suitcases and just filled them up, because there wasn't that kind of thing in post-war austerity Britain. And this is 1942. The chef's there. There's an American menu there, listing various wonderful ingredients, and he's got a tin of Spam, and that's all he's got to work with. And it just shows a little bit of sarcasm and a little bit of, hang on a minute, we've come out here for this. And it gives another dimension to ordinary people's lives. It also becomes incredibly emotive. Dan Miles and I wrote a piece for the Wiltshire Archaeology magazine, and we researched a lot of this, the World War I graffiti and filding. Now, and again, it brings in another dimension of war activity on Salisbury Plain, where soldiers were being persuaded that the tree and the smithy and the church were all represented in Longfellow's Village Blacksmith poem. And it was sold as such. So soldiers would turn up and they stripped the tree, they had to put a guard on the tree. And it just gives us this another dimension of commercial activity when there's an influx of population. So again, that massive movement of people during World War One. This leaf was in a diary of an Australian soldier. You know, so his family provided that, they put it online. And then you find people that don't make it back. And then we actually had, we found one chap, Horace Somerville, and I looked on New Zealand website and I found his pictures. He survived the war. He'd carved his name into the stonework. So a lot of this is pencil graffiti. And there was a message from one of his relatives who's in it. There was a message on Anzac Day to say, "I march on Anzac Day for your memory. I never knew you." And I thought, I need to contact her. So I sent her an email with a couple of photographs of his name. And she came back instantly. And I say instantly, it's New Zealand, so it was 12 hours later. So that was instant for me. She came back and she said, "This is fantastic. What a naughty lad. You know, we don't know anything about this." So we sent her everything else and we ended up sending the whole presentation over. Now, Brett Killington got involved. If you look at Brett's site, 64stops.com, now he's going to be working with us at Laycock, because Laycock is the home of photography in the UK. And he's got some wonderful, wonderful, he's a very adept photographer. But he uses a lot of pinhole camera work. He does a lot of tunnel work in France. And he also does a lot of education in terms of using very, very basic photography. If you want to have a look at the Leighton Pixel Company, again, it's another educational factor of stripping photography back down to its bare bones and using the very, very basic materials. What we couldn't understand is why the soldiers were encouraged to leave their names. And it took a lot of working out. And finally, we found that the vicar lost his son in 1914. So this is prior to these guys coming out. He lost his son in the First World War, and the vicar's buried in the churchyard. Then you've got a question. Is he allowing them to memorialize themselves, or is it providing a name on a wall that will have some kind of protection within a church building? Again, it's one of those things you have to use a little bit of thought, a little bit of leeway on it, just to think, well, hang on. That vicar was so foresighted in terms of dealing with his grief and allowing soldiers in there, under the realization that there's a chance they're not coming back. Highly emotive. Dan runs a site with Kathy called Wiltshire Glyphs, which is another dimension on graffiti. Okay, you're looking at trees, beech trees, particularly across Salisbury Plain, and they run Wiltshire Glyphs. They've got a very, very large corpus of different elements. I didn't want to get involved. Why not? Because the tree grows, it distorts, it's difficult enough to interpret this, but they've done a cracking job between them. And Kathy, especially, is very adept at taking parts of it and being able to identify. So we work closely with them as well, because they're friends, and this is another aspect of doing this kind of research. You share information, you make a lot of friends. It's a wonderful, wonderful social activity. And we don't always agree, but it's always a healthy argument. Now, using the raking light, we were fortunate to visit Scotland, and I'm looking at apopatreic symbols and hexaphores, rosettes on grave slabs. And I did these at night. Generally, if we do anything at night, we do it with the church's blessing, and we inform the police. Because if you're seen in a graveyard at night with torches and stuff like that, it awakens something in people, and they get a little bit agitated. So we generally inform the police, and they generally reassure once we've explained what we are actually doing. So again, these wonderful, wonderful Carmarthen stones, they vary in age from 12th century onwards, I think even earlier than that. Again, high status individuals, high status graves, but some wonderfully, wonderfully carved decoration. And it's applicable through the ages. It doesn't just fit in one particular chronology. It applies through millennia. So I've just done a trip to Ireland, and Even Lamb, who runs the Irish Rock Art and also the Irish Medieval Graffiti Group, dragged me out in the night. I mean, this is 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. Fantastic it was. It was beautiful. The west, I've been fortunate to go around a lot of places. And the west coast of Ireland is one of the most beautiful. It's fantastic. And we were using some long exposure. I say long exposure, as long as I could hold a camera still. I was traveling on a motorcycle. I didn't take a lot of kit with me. We took a couple of lights and a camera. And it's kind of like you get at night, just again, using that winter sun effect, but at night by naturally using this artificial light. And this is one of Even's photographs of me. It looks great, and I was fantastic. It's glorious. I was spoilt on the weather. Okay, so we were spoilt on that low sinking, setting sun. This is earlier the same night, but in the evening, and it was really casting across this beautiful, beautiful light. So if you, I always use the analogy. It's like winter sunlight on landscape. It emphasizes detail and just brings out a little bit more for further investigation. Not the most glamorous of pits. You know, I'm not the best dresser. I'm not the best guy. You know, smartest guy. But I just dragged myself out of a ditch, which was not too far away, looking at other rock art, as you can see by the residue on my leg. But that's by the by. Yeah. Even's done a lot of work up there, discovered a lot of rock art, and it's very compelling. And again, there's movement, there's fluidity, there's culture movement as well. Get on to that in a minute. Because I went looking for rock art the day before I met him, and I went up the Beera Way, which is a different peninsula. I did about 14 miles across the hills, and there's a lot of rocks. There's a lot of ground to cover, and I gave up, to be honest. I was having a wonderful walk. It's a beautiful landscape, absolutely marvelous. And this was the view in the evening when I came down and found some rock art, which has not been recorded. We've just registered it with the Irish monuments and some cut marks in a circle there. So I'm really chuffed with that. I got back eventually and sort of messaged Even, because I've seen her the next day. I said, look, it was on the equinox too, so incredibly special to her. And she said, yeah, that's it, fantastic. I said, I'm chancing my arm with this. That was the phrase I used. She said, no, it's fantastic. And it's right next to the style, right next to a derelict church. So you've got this Christian replacement of perhaps earlier important sites. Introduce a little bit of natural history as well. So if you're using solar symbols and you're using the sun, you're using planetary movements perhaps, and the fluidity of people moving as well. This little fella popped up in the night, and I've never been interested in slugs or anything like that. However, Even said, this is a Kerry slug. So what? I have no idea about it. Fantastic. Right? The Kerry slug exists southwest of Ireland and in the Iberian Peninsula and North Portugal. So you've got this wonderful associated with the Mesolithic, so 15,000 years of movement, 15,000 years of, it's not just restricted to slugs, there's plants, there's other fauna as well. And it just shows how this movement of people and cultures and spread doesn't just sit with the iconography and the artworks of human beings. It also extends to animals and slugs as well. Quite rare to see because they only come out at night, but a wonderful thing nonetheless. Bring it on home. This is just using a raking light within a confined environment, so it's within a building. So again, we were quite, that's prehistoric as well, and that's in Wiltshire, and it's in a private collection, but absolutely wonderful. So when we go looking for more rock art in Wiltshire, we did a photogrammetry of this. Now, sometimes you need a little bit of patience, and I do with photography. It took 8 hours for me to get this photograph, but it's in a wonderful location on top of the downs, on above Chute Forest, just on the Hampshire and Wiltshire border. it's anthropomorphic. We thought it might be associated with a long barrow that's just down the road. It's got enough detail in it to think, hang on, it's a natural piece. However, it's got enough anthropomorphic detail for someone to have an interest today and in prehistory. So again, you can Google that. We've done that as a 3D photogrammetry thing, and it's just a wonderful piece of enigmatic stonework, and it's 95% natural, according to Professor Tim Darville and Josh Pollard, who came out with us to have a look. But I was really, it was a wonderful to spend time with this piece, and that's another thing. You need to spend time with some of the graffiti. You need to spend time with some of the rock art in order to help you live with it and understand it and build a relationship with it. So I mentioned RTI, the reflectance transformation imaging with the dome, lots of lights. This is a Roman parquet that was found in St. Mary's in Calne, and is in the Wiltshire Museum. Andrew Zaminsky, a fellow, he did the conservation work. Martin Hennig, another fellow, Professor Martin Hennig, he did the diagnostics and the interpretation, and we did the camera work and as much. And I sat there in a room like this with Professor Hennig, manipulating the ball round. And what it does, it emphasizes light in different phases. And it's the phase, once deciding the manner of the length of your life. And next is weighing out your time. And the third is cutting it and deciding the manner of your death. And I think it's one of two pieces. There's another one in Germany. So it's a very, very rare piece, and it was just sat in a school in Calne. We actually had this 3D printed by Think 3D, Think C3D. I do apologise, Stephen. And he produced it at half size, and the school purchased it, and it's now hanging in their foyer. This piece remains within Wiltshire Museum and is on display. Now, with all the technology and all the technical stuff I've been showing, sometimes it just needs somebody to draw something which provides the best result. This is a tomb slab at Sherrington in Wiltshire, in the Wiley Valley. We found this on a well, I'll show you. On a very cold January morning, as you can see by the level of ice in the font there. And what it does, it contains a lot of fonts, but it also uses the apophoreic symbolism. It uses, Anthea is it's one of her favourite subjects in terms of Nine Men's Morris, various attributes of that. But what's important on this, it contains fonts that catch rainwater that then flow through the protective elements and then flow off. It doesn't work anymore, sadly, because it's tilted on an angle of some degrees. However, just drawing it, emphasizing it, and what we brought it out to, we put it on the enlisting the list, enriching the list. Let's try and get it right. We got it out on that, and I put an interpretation on it because there's a lot of springs in the area, and also there was a lot of with the British Agricultural Revolution, there was a lot of water meadows created. So they're extracting water from the ground and they're canalizing it in this area and bringing it down, and then increasing yield and increasing meat yield. And I think in the next village, there's a spring called the Devil's Hole. So you're in a situation whereby you're extracting water from a place known as the Devil's Hole. You've got this rural sort of interpretation on it. So they tried building a church there, and the devil would knock it down every morning, which is not confined to Wiltshire. However, to bring that in, you're using something from underneath the surface that has to then pass through some symbolism to be cleansed. That's the theory we put forward. That's fine. Nobody's challenged it as yet, so we'll see. Now, in terms of bringing stuff out of the ground, in terms of, concentric circles. I just wanted to throw this one out there because this is one of my favorite photographs. It's the Alton Priors Springs. And what it's doing is that the springs are gently emanating water. And a lot of people have posted rainwater as showing these concentric circles on the surface. Absolutely fine. Agree with that 100%. This adds a slightly different dimension by you're bringing it out of the ground. You've got high sun on it. So you've got the shadow cast by the sun. So it's also causing a ripple effect on the surface as well. So you've got a double whammy there. So in terms of, this wonderful concentric circles, and we find these designs in the graffiti. So this is a small barn just outside of Box in Wiltshire. So we've got the hexaphore, we've got the rosette, okay, and we've got these wonderful concentric circles again and again and again implied. That's protecting the harvest, possibly protecting the activity within the building and protecting the building itself. Again, we're quite well removed from it in terms of understanding. Now, I live in Hereford, and I was very fortunate that an old archaeologist friend of mine, Dale Rouse, had done some work with Malcolm Thurby, and he said, "Why don't you come out and look at some of the Herefordshire Romanesque? It's fantastic." And of course, the inspiration for some of the graffiti extends beyond the time it's actually cast. And it may stem from some of these solar symbols used on thresholds in more formal architecture. So on the left there, we've got Letton. On the top right, we've got again, that's Letton again, but a little bit focused on. And these are Brebwardine, and these are the it's a Sheelana gig in the middle with two hexafloors on the outside, again on a north door, again on a threshold, offering protection. The other side of Brebwardine, on the new porch, there's this wonderful solar symbol in the middle. Beautiful examples, and very, very fine in their detail. And this beauty is the underside of the lintel. So again, as you pass underneath, perhaps you are being cleansed. And again, we see that replicated again and again in graffiti in more informal styles. Now back to Wiltshire, taking the solar symbol again. On the right, we have probably the earliest example we found. It's on display, it's in Maiden Bradley, and it's an 8th century Saxon tomb. Again, and they're using a moon crescent as well, which is later synonymous with Mary. So again, a very early example. On the left is Codford. And I know Matt has got a theory about baptism fonts and everything else containing hexaphores and solar symbols, life-giving formal architecture, and it's a wonderful example of the font at Codford, St. Peter. So again, examples that we can use to transfer into the graffiti later. So I've run into, how much of time? All right, we're all right now. Okay. Sorry, 10 more minutes, be great, thank you. So we move to Laycock. This is the brewery and the bakehouse that I was indicating. So it's sort of post-dissolution, so 17th century, built by William Sharrington. And when people talk of magic in symbolism, what you can measure at Laycock is activity of people, activity of processes. And if I want to make a loaf of bread, it's a variable substance, variable ingredients, subject to many different forms of error. Next door is the brewery, equally important. And again, got that errors available within the processing. And you need to look at it. What we're looking at is looking at it from a perspective of, this is a process, this is a manufacturing process that is essential to life. And bearing in mind, the beer is not necessarily essential to life, but in terms of water quality, probably better so. However, you're protecting that process. And I call this doorway, which sits between the two of them. If you've ever worked in the food industry, which I have, you will be aware of the hazard analysis critical control point. So you've got a doorway, a very secure doorway between the two. You're keeping people out. You're keeping contaminants out, and you need to protect them. So what better way than to stick two lovely rosettes on there, very complex, beautifully done, well executed, which is also showing the fact that it's a planned thing. It's not a roughly done thing as an afterthought. This is a planned scenario. So between the two areas of manufacture, there is a level of protection which I think satisfies some of the criteria for food health and safety. So when we look at, and again, this is important because of sharing information. And a wonderful chap, Louis, in Portugal, who sent me some pictures from his sites, and he's got food manufacturing sites, but again, with a level of protection that is equivalent to ours. So, and again, and this is widespread throughout the continent. I will say that in terms of Laycott, I will be talking at Hidden Charms Conference, which is another date for the diary, which is next April, and we will be doing that in York as well. And again, if you want to look at protecting elements of your house, because it's not just about writing on the walls, it's not just about graffiti, it's not just about portrait symbols, it's about several different varieties of portable items. And Brian Hoggard runs up Portraits. He's got a wonderful book on magical house protection, which lists the recorded elements of these portable artworks. So, and they range from bottles to dead cats. And it's quite a bizarre set of circumstances and a mindset to look at what people were trying to achieve in terms of a protection of a process or a building. Bradford-on-Avon, a fantastic barn, beautiful barn. Again, another production area. There are threshing floors within there. There's storage capacities. There's references to a tithe barn. Well, I struggle with that one. Yes, possibly. However, these barns are such a size that they are built to survive 2, 3, maybe 4 seasons of harvest and production. And that's another element to it, is a crop failure will have a devastating effect on any population within that sort of medieval period. It would have a devastating effect today, as we see with prices. So it's all relevant, it fits. But when you come to Bradford-on-Avon, there are 300 plus motifs within there, all in different areas, different heights. And this is just one bay. And this is what it turns out. So even drawing circles around corners, which is just fantastic, you know, for the level of protection, whether it be windborne disease, whether it be molds and funguses. It's all part of that farming process and that manufacturing process. So absolutely wonderful. We've got hexaphores, we've crossed hexaphores, we've got some actually circles. The boat type symbols are later. So again, one thing we've managed to draw out of that is that we can, through recording that symbolism, we can record where the building was altered and renovated. So it adds another dimension to the study. Malmesbury Abbey, beautiful, beautiful building, exposed to the elements for a very long time. The left-hand side has a sort of coal site to it. But I only saw this through some raking light on the when the sun came out. And it brings up this beautiful hexaphore. This is about 3 feet across, a meter across, sorry, just under. And again, it possibly is a consecration cross. Matt's seen it, but we can't find any others. But in terms of level of detail, and it's on a curved surface, it is only surpassed by this one at Shurston, just down the road. And I can thank Dorothy Treasure for this from the Wiltshire Buildings Record, because she was with us and she said, you might want to bring your torch over here. There's a few lines you want to look at. And there's beautiful double hexaphore that wraps its way around the pillar. So you're going around a pillar, and it's perfect. What we often find in terms of particularly oolitic Bath limestone, it's soft, but it's erratic. Your your tools that you are using, whatever they may be. There's a whole level of discussion on that. It wraps itself around the pillar. So you've got this either one person or two people at least, possibly using maybe a string and a nail or some iron implement to create this. Plus they're doing it perfectly. There are no errors in this. It's a wonderful piece. I'm going to finish on Imber again. We started with Imber. I'm going to finish on Imber. This is from the top of the tower, looking across the landscape. Imber was, well, parts of Salisbury Plain were annexed for military purposes in the late Victorian period, and they gradually accrued more land. There's some controversial elements of the expulsion of people from the village. I think it was 1943. And it's a military training ground. The church remains, and some of the extant buildings associated with the village do, which we use for training. The church, however, is out of bounds, and we were invited to go and record some graffiti. There's loads in the porch, there's some around the building. Andrew Zieminski came out with us the other week, which was fantastic, because he got to see it firsthand. He also got to provide some important information in terms of dating, how you construct a tower. So you're constructing a tower, but as he says, Somerset towers take 3 years to build. As you overwinter them, leave it all packed with hessians or hessian sacks and let it dry out, let that lime cure. So we have some graffiti that we found on the bottom of the tower. So this is the actual bottom of the tower. This is probably a bit later. These are mason's marks on the left-hand side, again, using natural light. We've got a hexafoil here. There is a name and a date underneath. I don't associate that with a hexafoil. I think 2 seconds. But again, you're looking at that threshold. You're protecting that threshold. And at the top of the tower, we've got similar. We've got circles on the threshold into above where the bells were. We've got a half a fleur-de-lis. I didn't see it as that. Again, it's interpretation. You're looking for what tools you're using, what you're looking at, and what your experience is. And it took Katie to say, well, it's half a fleur-de-lis on its side. I'd convinced myself it was a wood plane, the swarf coming out of it, and that was it. So we actually found another one of these at Great Charfield Manor. So again, now what's going on here? Is this a Mary sort of votive offering whilst keeping it a secret by using half a fleur-de-lis? And again, the Great Charfield Manor one is exactly the same. And you wanted to hide that post-dissolution for obvious reasons. But in between, John Samways, who I mentioned earlier, eagle-eyed John, we were coming down the tower. We weren't used to heights. We weren't used to buildings at that point in time. We weren't used to the confined spaces. I wanted to get out. There was a bottleneck. And John shouted, yeah, hang on a minute. He said, I found a face, which you'll see in a minute. While I was sat there, I found this other chap. And in between, everybody else was like, hang on a minute, there's loads of stuff. So when those guys stumbled across Lascaux in front, and their eyes accumulated to the light, they started seeing all this stuff. They were at our Lascaux moment. It's a wonderful moment. And this dog's got movement in it. When I showed this, and I did a talk on the Kerry Peninsula, and some of the feedback from there, and he even said, when I drew a dog as a kid, I thought the ears were torn because they were hunting dogs. So when I draw a dog's ears as a child, to show movement, I would show 2 ears. And that might well be so, looking at it again, because they both got the torn ears, but it may be reflecting movement. And the ribs are showing and everything else. So what's going on there? Well, this was the chap I was sat next to. And it's revealed to be the guy blowing a hunting horn. So is this a ceremony to celebrate the building of the first part of the tower, which was constructed? The tower was completed in 1410. The final slide. This slide shows we found a bit more of him. He's not in great proportion, poor lad. He's a bit tall, a bit gangly. The dog sits to his left. He's got a sword. He's got his hand on the sword, and he's got a nice pair of shoes and a pair of legs and a pleated skirt. And that's all that remains. The rest of it is gone. And it's only when you get to the final slide where This is the one John spotted. And it's beautiful. This is down on the lower side. It's beautiful detail. And it's very rare we can get dating. It's very rare that we can get fairly secure dating in terms of anything. But to get it with this guy, we're in a situation where we've got this wonderful chaperon hat. Okay, so it's a style of turban. You've got a liripipe that comes down and is worn over the arm. He's got his hand clasped on his sword, same as a hornblower. There's another chap to his side. And the level of detail in that, we think it may be Walter Hungerford the first. We've sent it to Guy Hungerford, who is the modern day descendant. And he was chuffed to bits with it, because there aren't any representations of Walter Hungerford. No. And that's when it comes in. So if the tower was completed at 1410, the chaperon hat was popular a little bit later, for a period of 50 years or so in Britain. And again, it's moved from the continent. So you've got fashion traveling. And the liripipe, again, similar sort of period. So again, you can condense that date down. So either the chaperon hat was a little bit earlier, the Cravito's a little bit later, or it's right on the cusp of, say, 1408, 1409. That's how accurate we can pin this down to. Walter Hungerford died in 1439, I do believe. But again, it's putting stuff out there, sharing it, and trying to disseminate information to help us understand how people lived, dressed. And the bizarre thing is, it was only in fashion for 50 or 60 years. You can go on the internet today and buy one of these. It's fantastic. But we're looking at ways of relaying this information at Imber. It's in a tower which is non-accessible. It'll be a health and safety nightmare. And again, we'll be writing up on it and doing a book on it. But it just gives another dimension to the whole Wiltshire, Salisbury Plain scenario. Thank you very much.
This one on? Yeah. Thank you so much, Tony. That was absolutely fascinating and really broad ranging. I'm going to throw the floor straight open for any questions.
Hello, thanks for that.
Hello.
I briefly seen other presentations. Don't ask me where or when, because I don't remember what I did yesterday. But I heard in my back of my furry brain sticks the words Crusader marks.
Yes, I've heard that one.
Tell me, what is a Crusader mark?
I don't actually, and I don't recognize any of it as a Crusader mark. It was an old, when we first started recording this, people would come and say, oh, they're Crusader marks, that's what they are. Well, not necessarily, there's no evidence for that. And that's the problem, is working with evidence. I think Matt's dragged out a Crusader mark, a cross that was interpreted as a Crusader mark, but it's not a Crusader mark necessarily. He's got some documentary evidence to say it was used as a seal or a vote of office or something like that, in terms of this contract has been signed with this or something like that. The Crusader marks is an old analogy that has been accepted, and this is the thing. You stick this in the bracket with witches' marks and things like that. It carried favour many years ago. I don't mean that rudely. It carried favour many years ago. There's little evidence for it. When you look at pilgrimage marks, again, there may be some debate on that. But there is a chap in Wiltshire that has written a great deal about pilgrimage marks, working its way down through the Cotswolds. And I think that's great, because it's an interpretation of it. And again, you're putting information out there and you're sharing information. So we will argue it to kingdom come. We really will. And that's fine, as long as it's relevant and it's nicely done, So that's marvellous. So I can't help it.
Thanks for that. Anybody else? Because I've got just something to say. No? Right, I'll say it. About 25 years ago, my daughter bought a house off plan in Lincolnshire. Nothing special, just an estate house. And the builder insisted that they put something in the footings. I think they put a coin, but it could have been anything, child's toy. So this continues. This is Lincolnshire 25 years ago. And he
Absolutely.
absolutely insisted that they did it. Now, is that?
Yep, absolutely. Right, that coin thing is I mean, I've studied a bit of maritime archaeology, and the coin goes underneath the mast, doesn't it? That's an old appropriate thing to do. Tradition. So that symbolism changes through time, and particularly recently. You know, I've made stonework and tried to recreate poorly because I'm not used to using the tools every day like some people are, and I always put a date on it. Right? Now, I ran this past some stonemasons. At the talk I did in Westbury, we had 3 generations of stonemasons. They all piled in right at the last minute, and I thought, I was going to kick off in a minute because I'm going to be challenged on various things. And they were great, right? These guys from Westbury were brilliant. They brought their teenage sons, and they were great. And so they have an affinity with repairing buildings. Andrew Zieminski, again, looking at various different things. We had a stonemason working at a place just outside Swindon. And I said to him, do you recreate anything? Do you do? Because he wanted to know what we were doing. He said, yeah, we did. He said, but we always put it on the back side of the stone, so it's not visible. And he said, there's a hierarchical thing. And I said, well, what's that? He said, well, I don't let anybody else do it. He said, I let them write the names. He said, but I carve it in. So again, you've got that dimension of hierarchy within the building. So again, it's tradition carried on. It's fantastic. There are countless examples of this being carried on. Again, you know, and why not? You know, the people that work with the buildings, the people that curate the buildings, it's their building. The people that work with them have the same respect. One of my most amusing ones, I haven't got it with me, but is at Westbury. It's part of a memorial that's been broken off. And obviously contracts have changed over the years, and a guy's written there in pencil, this was broken before I started, right? And it's just like, well, that's a typical, you know, I'm not taking blame for that, you know, but it's there, it stays there, it's permanent now, and it will remain. So yes, absolutely, this traditional thing will carry on, and it carries on throughout, it changes throughout time.
That was great, thanks. I just had 2 technical questions. What was the name of the technique you were using to generate the green topographical kind of images?
The green ones there, that's a laser scan.
That's a laser scan.
Yeah, but it's just raw data.
Okay.
So there's no texture put on it, because if you use a laser scanner on very, very fine detail, you start to lose it. Once you start to put texture and other layers of software onto it, you start to lose it. So I was using extremely raw data, which either comes out as a green or whatever, but it was just a question of getting that detail out from you.
Sure. And what was the name of the technique you said that you used to bring out the plane image in the military graffiti? You said it was some kind of plugin?
On the plane image.
Yeah, how did you said there was some kind of software that was being used by somebody that was working on Native American.
Yeah, that's John Harmon. It's called D-Stretch, and it's DS, however they spell the rest of the words.
Yeah, stretch, yeah.
Okay.
But it was you said it was
Now, we bought a license on that. It used to be free to download, and then you try it, and if you like it, you could buy it. Now he's put on it that you pay $50. Okay. Now the amount we've used it, it was well worth that. And not only that, John updates it. So if you pay, it doesn't say this, but when you pay the $50, he comes back and says thank you, because he's had a lot of people download it and not contribute. So if people contribute to it, then he's inspired and he will develop it further. And it's quite. I think it used to run in Java. Now it runs in ImageJ. So ImageJ is the holding thing, and the plugin is the D-Stretch.
sure.
So again, you can download ImageJ for free, and then you buy the plugin from John, and it's well worth it. It is fantastic. We apply it to so many different things.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I have a couple of questions from on our online audiences. First one is, What is next? Where are you going to turn your attention to after today?
We should be back at Laycock. We should be back at Laycock and just developing. What we're seeing at Laycock is a full conservation deal regarding the house, the abbey. So you've got several different periods of time where it's been beautifully conserved. And I will say, like, we've got excellent staff there. They've got excellent staff there who are so enthusiastic about the project, and we will build up a big profile, which will then be relayed. It's winter's coming. I need to do some writing. I don't like writing during the summer. We should be out doing stuff. All right, I've got a lot of writing to catch up on. We're going to do a book on Imber, and I'd like to get, some laser scanning business in. That'd be nice. But it's all again, developing, presenting, and trying to get the best out of the building and add to the knowledge of the building. That's essentially what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Next question. Fascinating talk. Thank you. Do you think, and is there the evidence that the Wiltshire is typical or untypical as a county in extent, nature, and graphic of its medieval graffiti? Might it have significantly more for any reason in comparison with other regions?
No, is the easiest answer. No, it's not necessarily comparable. The thing is, I think it's the buildings that remain. So you've got the buildings that remain. So we've only got the choice of the buildings that remain, and we're quite sporting in Wiltshire, very fine buildings. You move into Gloucestershire, again, you've got a similar sort of trait. The Norfolk Medieval Graffiti Survey has covered hundreds of churches, which carry this wonderful corpus of examples. Hereford, where I'm living currently, and where I used to live when I was growing up, different kettle of fish. You've got the Romanesque, but you've got to look at the longevity of the stone as well. This is what I struggle with, is the Romanesque stuff. The 12th century Romanesque is of a very fine quality red sandstone, I do believe. But Hillpeck is well known, but there's a lot of restoration work gone on there. But when you look at a lot of the Herefordshire red sandstone, it defoliates, the surface just destroys. So maybe there's some that was there and we've just lost it. Other areas, Hampshire, there's a Hampshire Medieval Graffiti Survey. They've got some wonderful stuff. So again, it's not confined to Wiltshire. It is spread all across the country, but in some areas, and particularly if the stone is particularly hard, you're not going to get quite as much. So we're spoilt in Wiltshire because of the oolitic limestone, very soft in its raw state, and very easy to work.
And the last question from online. With regard to the six-petaled rosette in the beer cellar, I have found many examples of the rosette in connection to domestic or food items, such as butterprint, spoons, foods, chest. Thoughts?
Yes, absolutely wonderful. Again, you're back to that portable use and activity. So you're using it as a process. This is the wonderful thing. Spending time in the Bradford and Avon barn. One of the questions I was asked by English Heritage was, have you increased, how long are people in there for? Because people may walk in, examine the roof, oh, this is fantastic, and be gone in 10 minutes without casting any aspersions. I don't know how long I'll carry on talking for. If I'm in there, they will stay there for 3/4 of an hour because we'll have them looking for stuff and all the rest of it. But it lacks portable items. So when you get these wonderful tools and furniture too, and it spreads right the way through. So yes, it's absolutely very enthusiastic about it.
Okay. Thank you so much again, Tony. That was absolutely fantastic. And thank you all for coming along and for all the fantastic questions that we've had, both in the room and online. So it's just leaves to me to remind you all that our next lecture is actually in February 2023. It's part of the Intertwined Histories series of lectures, Social Justice, the Material Culture Drivers of Indigenous Inequality by Professor Claire Smith, FSA. It will be here in Burlington House as well as online. And our full autumn event program is also available online for anyone who would like to have a look or just ask us while you're here. So thank you all again for coming, and a big round of applause for Tony. Thank you.